Alright, so, welcome to the Shaman card review, and let's hop right in. To get started, we have a 0-mana spell called Ancestral Healing. You restore a minion to full health and give it Taunt. It's not used all that often. Shaman cards aren't known for having all that high of health, so... And Shaman doesn't really have a great way to buff the health of cards, so it's not used very often. It's not a terrible card. I mean, there are certain things that it could combo with and just be absolutely amazing, but Shamans don't really have high health cards, so it's not that useful. Sure, it's still a free way to give something Taunt, but I mean, at that point you might as well just use like a Sun Fury Protector or some other card or minion which can give other things Taunt. So yeah, not that great of a card, just because there's better ways to do what it does, and for Shamans the healing isn't all that useful. Totemic Might, another 0-mana spell. Give your totems +2 health. Again, not a great card. And it's not because it wouldn't be useful. You know, Shamans could have plenty of totems out at once, but the thing is, totems don't have attack. There's exactly one totem that Shaman has which just naturally has any sort of attack, and it's one attack. That would be Searing Totem. We'll get to that later. And then there's Flame Tongue. We'll also get to that later, but that one doesn't have attack on its own. So yeah, Totemic Might isn't used very often just because totems, giving them health doesn't make them any more threatening. It just makes them slightly more annoying. So, not that great a card. Yep. That's about all there is to say about it. Next up, Earth Shock. 1-mana spell. Silence a minion, then deal 1 damage to it. It's more useful for its ability to silence than its ability to deal 1 damage, but the fact that it does deal damage still makes it pretty good. Shamans don't tend to have all that much... that difficult of a time getting spell damage, so you can buff that 1 damage and this becomes even more potent. There's another reason that this card is really, really useful, I suppose. It's considered good because of one other card, which otherwise would be ludicrous. There's a minion which costs 4 mana, called Twilight Drake. It is naturally a 4/1, but its battle cries to gain 1 health for each card in your hand. If you have Earth Shock, it silences the Drake, right? So it goes back to being a 4/1. Then it deals 1 damage to it. On average, a summoned Drake will be like a 4/7 or 4/8 on turn 4. That's pretty crazy. Earth Shock, boom. There's your answer. Crazy minion destroyed. So, Earth Shock is considered just an absolutely quintessential card for that reason. You need to have it in a Shaman deck in case someone plays Twilight Drake, because it's just too good of an answer to that card. So yeah, that's Earth Shock. Next up, Forked Lightning. Costs 1 mana. Deal 2 damage to 2 random enemy minions. Overload of 2. At first it seemed like... at first it would seem like, you know, oh, this is an absolutely amazing card. Cost 1 mana, deal 2 damage to 2 random enemy minions. That's almost like a multi-shot, but cheaper. Thing about this is, you need to recognize what Overload is. It is Shaman's, like, signature thing about their class. A lot of their spells are cheaper than they should be, but they pay the price with this Overload. What Overload means is, on your next turn, however high the value of that Overload is, that's how many mana crystals you won't be able to use next turn. You effectively go into that turn with them already empty. So I use this on turn 1. Say I'm playing against like a Zoo deck, right? They summon 2 Flame Imps and I just Forked Lightning, boom, they're both dead. Well, next turn, even though it's turn 2 and I should have 2 mana crystals, because this is Overload 2, I have no mana crystals I can use. So that's how Overload works. And yes, it does stack, so if you use multiple spells that each have their own Overload, the Overload will stack. So you could overload yourself completely. So yeah, that's always something you really gotta watch when playing Shamans, and it's honestly the reason I don't play Shaman. I'm just not very good at playing with Overload in mind. So, still, Forked Lightning can be really good against a Zoo deck, or just any sort of really early game aggro deck. But yeah, it's just not run because it's really cheap, but it's got a really hefty Overload. So that's that. Next up, Frost Shock. Costs 1 mana, deal 1 damage to an enemy character, and freeze it. I don't know. It's not terrible. Not really good either. I mean, might as well just use Earth Shock, right? Silence plus 1 damage should be a lot better than freeze and 1 damage, so... yeah, Frost Shock is just kind of... it's not used, and... just because it's not... there's so many better things you can do for 1 mana with Shaman, and we'll touch on all of those, but yeah, there's just so many better cards than Frost Shock that Shaman can use that it's not run. It's not that great. Next up, Lightning Bolt. Cost 1 mana, deal 3 damage, overload of 1. This is really good card, really cheap way to deal 3 damage and get good answers out for just about anything. Because it's a spell, you know, it stacks with spell damage. The overload, it's on the overload of 1, so usually it's not all that hurtful. You can even use this early in the game and it usually won't have too big an impact. That being said, always when playing Shaman, be mindful of the overload, but Lightning Bolt is just a great card because it's a really cheap 3 damage. Yes, there's the overload, but still, I mean, 1 mana for 3 damage. That's a great card. So that's Lightning Bolt. Next up, Rockbiter Weapon. Costs 1 mana, give a friendly character plus 3 attack this turn. Basically seems like a Lightning Bolt without the overload, and oftentimes it is. The major difference between this and Lightning Bolt is that this, since it gives plus 3 attack, you're still going to have to attack whatever creature you intend to deal that 3 damage to, either with your hero, because you can use Rockbiter Weapon to give the attack to your hero, or with a minion. So Lightning Bolt can be a bit more effective as board clear. But there's the overload. Also, Rockbiter Weapon is not affected by spell damage. So, whereas Lightning Bolt gets buffed by 1 damage for every 1 spell damage you have on the board, Rockbiter Weapon does not receive that buff. There are scenarios in which Rockbiter Weapon is far more useful than Lightning Bolt, though, and we'll get to those. Don't worry. Next up, Dust Devil. It is a 1 mana 3/1 minion with Wind Fury. Seems good, right? Well, it's got Overload too. On top of that, it's only got 1 health. There's basically not a class out there that doesn't have a way to deal 1 damage to a minion you summon turn 1. And if you summon this thing, it's basically a 3 mana 3/1 with Wind Fury. I mean, it's just not worth it. The damage potential's there, but on the other hand, if your opponent destroys it when you summon it, it's gonna screw you over for 2 turns. So it's got potential, but it's not used very often for that reason. It's easy to deal with, and if it's dealt with, you're in trouble. So, yep. That's that one. Let's make sure I'm not missing any 1-drops. Nope. Okay. Next up, Stormforged Axe. It is a 2 mana weapon, 2 attack, 3 durability, and it has Overload 1. Really good card, you know, it's... 2 damage is more than sufficient to deal with most creatures early game. On top of that, the 3 durability means you can usually get a 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 value out of this axe, which is, you know, as I said, amazing. Yes, there's Overload, but you'll find that oftentimes the best Shaman cards have Overload on them. So, that's the trick to being a good Shaman, knowing how and when to overload. And by how much. Next up, Wind Fury. Spend 2 mana, give a minion Wind Fury. I probably should have explained Wind Fury with the Dust Devil, too. What Wind Fury is it means your minion can attack twice in one turn instead of once in one turn. So, yeah, basically your minion can deal a lot more damage. Very useful. The card itself, I don't know. I don't particularly like it. There's a card in Shaman's deck which can do this and more, so there's that. On top of it, Shaman really is more of a spell-heavy class than a minion-heavy class. It's weird. I mean, Shaman's almost always going to have a nearly full board because they can just summon totems like crazy. But, again, the totems don't have attack, and yeah, I don't know. It's got potential, but personally it's not one of my favorite cards. I think there's better ones out there. That being said, this is where Rockbiter Weapon can be far more useful than Lightning Bolt. If you give a minion the ability to attack twice in one turn, and then you give it Rockbiter, you're giving it +3 attack, and it can use it twice in one turn. So that's just off of Wind Fury plus Rockbiter. That's an additional 6 damage, at least. So, and that's assuming your minion has 0 attack to start with. So, it's got potential. A lot of potential, and it's why Rockbiter is a great card. Next up, Flame Tongue Totem. It is a 2-mana totem, has 0 attack. Hey! Well, that just tells us it's a totem, and 3 health. However, its text makes it far more useful. Adjacent minions have +2 attack. This can effectively be a 4/3 for 2 mana. I mean, that's insane. That's great for a 3-drop. This is a 2-drop. So, Flame Tongue Totem is just an absolutely great card. Typically in Shaman, at least so I've been told by a friend of mine who plays the class quite frequently. You guys have actually seen him on stream, Scop. Flame Tongue Totem's best use is actually not to summon it early in the game and just try to get damage out there. Usually using it for its surprise value is most effective, since this gives adjacent minions +2 attack. It doesn't matter that the Flame Tongue itself will have summoning sickness when you play it, because if you've got 2 minions next to it who are already on the board, and you give them each +2 attack, the 4 damage is still going to go through. So, if you play this right, it can basically be a 2-drop 4/3 with charge. That's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, Flame Tongue, great card. Absolutely great. Next, oh wait, nope, I know I'm missing something now. Ancestral Spirit. It is a 2-mana spell. Choose a minion. When that minion is destroyed, return it to the battlefield. It's got potential. Problem is, quite often, what you'll find yourself doing is playing a minion, praying your opponent doesn't deal with it, and then you have the opportunity to use Ancestral Spirit on that minion. Usually, minions will be dealt with before you can Ancestral Spirit them, so I mean, either you're going to be using this on really low-cost minions that, you know, returning them to life isn't all that great, or finding your high-cost minions already dealt with by the time you could have Ancestral Spirited them. So, it's got a lot of potential, but in a practical sense, it's not that great of a card. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but that's how it works. Next up, 3 mana, spell called Farsight. Draw a card. That card costs 3 less mana. Honestly, this card seems amazing to me. I don't know why it isn't run in more Shaman decks, but it isn't. So, there's gotta be something that pros see in it that just I don't. I mean, the ability to draw a card. It's basically just saying, spend 3 mana, draw a card, and if that card costs more than 3 mana, this is basically a free card draw. Free card draw is great. Free card draw! but I don't know. It seems amazing to me, but it's not run. I've never seen a Shaman deck that runs this. Well, I've never seen a successful Shaman deck that runs this, so... Yeah. I don't know what to tell you guys about that one. That's Farsight. I guess I don't have it. I don't know. If you don't get it, that was terrible, but oh well. Next up, 3-mana spell, Feral Spirit. Summon 2/3 Spirit Wolves with Taunt. It has an overload of 2. Here's what your little wolves look like. Hello! So, you're basically summoning a 4/6 with Taunt for 3 mana. Yes, there's the overload, but that's still 5 mana to summon a 4/6 with Taunt. And, you know, we've seen in the Druid card review that that's pretty great. So, yeah, that's what that is. Absolutely great card. It's got overload, but again, there's ways to work with that. So, yep. Next up. You can see Shaman's got a lot of cheap cost cards. Next up is Lava Burst. It is a 3-mana spell. Deal 5 damage, overload of 2. It seems basically like a slightly stronger Lightning Bolt, but it's not. The damage to mana ratio is significantly worse than Lightning Bolt. On top of that, the overload 2 means it's basically 5 mana for 5 damage. There's just better ways to deal 5 damage than that. That being said, Lava Burst is still good, ironically enough, if you want to try to burst something. Say you have 2 Lightning Bolts and 2 Lava Bursts, you can spend 8 mana to deal 16 damage, assuming you have absolutely no spell damage on the board. And in most Shaman decks, that's a very uncommon occurrence. Very often Shamans will have plenty of spell damage. So, that's Lava Burst. It's actually pretty good, but it's still not as good as Lightning Bolt. There's reasons to run it and reasons not to, so depends on the Shaman deck you're playing as to whether or not it'll use Lava Burst. Why can't I talk today? Anyone else notice that? I don't know. Okay, moving on. Next up is a 3-mana spell, Lightning Storm. It is Shaman's principal form of board clear. Spend 3 mana, deal 2 to 3 damage to all enemy minions. This is randomly selected. It'll either deal 2 damage or 3 damage, and it's randomly selected for each enemy minion. So you could deal 2 damage to one minion and 3 to another, and 2 to another. So for every minion, for every enemy minion, you will either deal 2 or 3 damage to it, randomly selected for every minion. It has an overload of 2. Yeah. It's basically like a Holy Nova, which we've gone over, or a Starfall, but with more damage potential. On top of that, it is buffed by spell damage. And Shamans tend to have that in abundance. Yeah, Lightning Storm's a pretty good form of board clear. Pretty good. Okay, let's not have that thing a-ringing. Yeah, you guys don't want to hear that. Sorry. Excuse me. Anyway, moving on. Lightning Storm, great card. Shaman's principal form of board clear. Next up, Mana Tide Totem. Costs 3 mana. It's a totem. And look, it has 0 attack. Hey! It is indeed a totem. However, its text makes it amazing. At the end of your turn, draw a card. This means that at worst, the Mana Tide Totem will get 1-for-1 value from itself. At best, it will do even better than that, so yeah. Mana Tide Totem, great card, Shaman's main way to draw cards. So yeah, that's Mana Tide. Great card, used in almost every Shaman deck. Next up, Unbound Elemental. It is a 3-mana 2/4. Whenever you play a card with Overload, gain +1/+1. We've seen plenty of cards with Overload, there's still more that Shaman has. So, yeah, this thing has a lot of potential, and even then, for 3 mana having 4 health, it makes it very hard to deal with. And just as a 2/4, I mean, that's still pretty good for 3 mana. But having the potential to go even higher than that, it just makes it so this card has to be run in almost every Shaman deck because it's got so much potential. And if you manage to make a Shaman deck with no overload in it, I'm pretty sure you've made a really bad Shaman deck, so... Yep. That's Unbound. Absolutely great card. Next up, we have to come out of crafting mode. Hex. It is a 3 mana spell. Transform a minion into a 0/1 frog with taunt. This does remove all text from the card, it removes all enchantments, everything. So it's basically like silencing a minion and then turning it into a 0/1 frog with taunt. So yeah. Everything that's already affecting the card is also removed. Here's what Froggy looks like. I mean, are you surprised? He looks exactly like he does in the picture. Hi, Frog. Kermit. Call him Kermit, if you want. I don't know. But yeah. That's Hex. It's Shaman's other form of board clear that is just amazing. Yeah, it's like with Priest cards, Shadow Word's Pain and Death, except it isn't affected by 4 health minions, you can use it on those, or, it's just a straight up better form of Polymorph for mages. And, well yeah, Hex is a great card. If you're not running Hex, you're doing something wrong. It's amazing. Might as well just be 3 mana, destroy a minion. Might as well. Have I missed anything? No, I have not. Next up, Windspeaker. It is a 4 mana 3/3 creature. Battlecry, give a friendly minion Wind Fury. I think this is why Wind Fury isn't run as a card, because you could just use Windspeaker instead. That being said, his stats really suffer as a 4-drop for having his Battlecry. Spending 4 mana for a 3/3 is typically not good. Yeah, he can give a minion Wind Fury, but again, some Shaman decks don't run him. Actually, most of them don't, because Shamans just tend to do better off of spell damage rather than, you know, having tons of minions and going all aggro. So, typically not ran in Shaman decks, he just kind of doesn't tend to have that much a purpose. I don't know. Yeah. He's Next up, Bloodlust. 5 mana spell, give your minions +3 attack this turn. It's got potential, especially because it's useful even with totems. I mean, yeah. Combat with Wind Fury, it can be ridiculous for damage. Problem with it is, Shamans don't... Again, they're not aggro. It's more of a spell damage and board control-y type class, and Bloodlust is an absolutely amazing aggro spell, but Shamans aren't all that aggro. And if you have no minions on the field, this is just dead. You have to get back up to the point of having, you know, at least 3 or 4 minions on the field before Bloodlust becomes worth playing. So yeah, it's got a lot of potential, but it's typically not run in Shaman decks because it is just completely wrecked by any sort of control deck. So, yeah, it's got potential, but not used all that often. Next up, do need to go back into crafting. We have Shaman's other weapon, 5 mana. It is called Doom Hammer. It is a 2/8. So, that wouldn't seem amazing for a weapon, right? I mean, that is really high durability, but just to attack, it seems like a more expensive and slightly better version of Light's Justice. Well, it has Wind Fury. So, it's more effectively almost like a 4/4, except for you can distribute the damage however you want. It's just really good. Additionally, because Doomhammer has Wind Fury, which means your hero can attack twice in one turn, you can use Rockbiter Weapon on yourself with a Doomhammer to get off 10 damage in one turn. You see how, right? 2 attack plus 3 attack. Deal 5, that's 5. Deal that twice in one turn, 10. That's for 6 mana for just a 10 damage spike. That's pretty crazy. That is really crazy. So yeah, Doomhammer, one of the best weapons in the game. Not sure how I'd compare it to Ashbringer, but yeah, Doomhammer, great card, absolutely great Shaman weapon. If you have it, you use it. That's it. And I do mean if you have it as a card, you run it in your deck, not if it's in your hand, you immediately just play it. That's not what I mean. Although, interestingly enough, that usually is how it works. Anyway, next up, Earth Elemental. He is a 5 mana 7/8. Holy crap. A 7/8 for 5 mana. What? With Taunt. Well, he's got Overload 3. So, I mean, if you play this guy on turn 5, he's basically going to knock you back to turn 3 the next turn. So, he's closer to an 8 mana 7/8 who can be played very early in the game. Earth Elemental has a lot of potential, but it's like with Dust Devil. If he gets dealt with, you're just in trouble. Because you've overloaded yourself for 3 mana, and suddenly the massive creature you played for it is gone. So, and yeah, most decks will have a way to deal with this. I mean, we've gone over the types of board clear. I suppose it'd be pretty good against Druid, which is quite in the meta right now, but yeah, most other decks will have a way to deal with this. So, yeah, he's got a lot of potential, but when you play an Earth Elemental, you basically better start praying that nobody answers it, because if it gets answered, yeah, you're in trouble. Oops. Next up, Fire Elemental. He is a 6 mana 6/5 with a Battle Cry, deal 3 damage. Absolutely amazing. You might as well just be playing a, 6/5 for 6 mana that also has Lightning Bolt as an effect. Just shoot something for 3 damage. So, great card. Absolutely great card. Run in most Shaman decks. Yeah. Fire Elemental's amazing. Then last but not least, Shaman's legendary card. He is an 8 mana 3/5. Huh? That seems pretty weak, right? Well, look at all this text. I should have stated his name. Alakir the Windlord. His text. He has Wind Fury, Charge, Divine Shield, and Taunt. So, that's a lot of text. But even so, I mean, it's still an 8 mana 6/5 effectively with Charge, Divine Shield, and Taunt. That's got potential, but it's not always all that amazing. Alakir does gain a lot of damage potential when you combo him with like Flame Tongue Totem and Rockbiter Weapon though. I mean, if it's turn 10 and you've got Alakir in your hand plus 2 Rockbiters, you drop him and give him double Rockbiter. He instantly becomes a 9/5 with Wind Fury and Charge. That's 18 damage, bam bam. That's pretty good. Alakir's got potential, but personally I don't like him all that much, but that's me. There are decks that run him. He's got, as I said, he's got potential, so yeah. That's Alakir. That also does it for the Shaman card review. Before we go, though, we do need to go over Shaman's hero power. So, his hero power. Spend 2 mana, summon a random totem. There are 4 different totems you can summon off of this whole random effect, and I can showcase them. Here we go. Starting off, Healing Totem. You will notice this is a consistent thing with all of them. Each of these totems will cost 1 mana. It shows right here. And that's a consistent thing with all of them, in case they get returned to your hand or something, I don't know. But yeah, you don't get charged the 1 mana when you summon them. It's just in case they get bounced to your hand or something. Anyway, so starting off Healing Totem. The effect is at the end of your turn, heal all of your minions for 1 health. That's pretty good, especially for a 0-2. I mean, it's a pretty great way to keep all your minions alive. So, not a bad totem. Next, Wrath of Air Totem. Also a 0-2. He has spell damage +1, so that's one of the ways shamans can get spell damage, just off of tapping for totems. Next, Stoneclaw Totem. He is a 0-2 with Taunt. Pretty good for protecting other minions or stalling out the game. I've seen Stoneclaw Totems come in pretty clutch and even win games just because, you know, someone has lethal on the board, boom, a Stoneclaw stops it all, because now you have a 0-2 minion to deal with, and if the opponent doesn't have a way to do that, you know, they gotta start using creatures. So, Stoneclaw is pretty good. Last but not least, Searing Totem. He is the only totem in the game who actually has attack. It is a 1-1. So, yep. That Searing Totem. Basically, Shaman has the potential to be a paladin. Yay! With his hero power, at least. Summon in 1-1s. It is noteworthy, though. Shaman will only summon 1 of each of these. So, if you already have any of the 4 on the field, that one is eliminated from being randomly summoned, and if all 4 are out and you tap to summon totems, you don't summon a totem. So, yeah. You got a max of 4 totems you can summon. So that's Shaman. Not a bad class at all. It is completely unrivaled for early game board control. Just completely unrivaled. There's nothing that's better at early game than Shaman. At least for board control. For damage, there's classes, but that's for another time. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the Shaman card review. That's it for, well, the card review. Alright.